Good morning, Rabbi. Today's daf is daf Mem Dalid 44, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Mem Gimel Amud Beis 43b at the Esve, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines up from the bottom. So remember, again, we find ourselves in the midst of a riveting discussion regarding the mitzvah of Arava. We know there's a concept of taking the Arava, but we had a machlokes. Is the mitzvah to go ahead and take the Arava and walk around the Mizbeach? Or is the mitzvah simply to go ahead bizikifa, to stand the arava up against the mizbeach? This was a machlokes. So the Gemara goes out to the Gemara says, Esvei, lulav dochas ha-Shabbos b'tchila. So arava b'sofo, lulav is dochas Shabbos, right? Lulav, meaning one takes lulav on Shabbos, as we've established, when the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. Arava is taken on Shabbos when the last day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. Pam achos, one time it happened, shechal shvi'i shal arava lios b'Shabbos, an incredible story. One time the seventh day of Pesach fell out on Shabbos, which just, by the way, is a raya to the fact that the calendar is set up in such a way that the last day of Pesach could fall out on a Shabbos. Or the truth is, this is even before the codification of the calendar. But in any event, the seventh day of Pesach fell out on Shabbos. Ve'viu marbios shal arava me'erev Shabbos. So knowing that they were going to have to conduct the arava service in the Beis HaMikdash on day number 7, they brought bundles of aravas to the Mikdash already on Friday afternoon, erev Shabbos. Ve'nichum ba'azar, they left them in the courtyard. Ve'kiru bahen baitusim. The baitusim saw the bundles of the aravas. Now, as Rashi points out, the baitusim don't believe in Torah Shabbat Peh. They don't believe in the verbal tradition. As such, they don't believe in the mitzvah of arava. Because although we will see a dispute what exactly is the nature of the mitzvah of arava, up until now the Gemara is assuming that is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So halacha l'Moshe Sinai is a d'oraisa, but of course is not written in the Torah. It was transmitted from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe and from Moshe to us. The baitusim did not believe in this practice. Therefore, what did they do? They took the aravas and they hid them under stones. Okay, interesting, they didn't destroy them, they hid them under stones. So this is incredible. The next day, people saw that the baitusim they saw that the aravas were taken, and they understood that at the end of the day, that the tzedukim did this. Now Rashi points out, why did the baitusim place the aravas under rocks? They placed them under rocks. Why? Rashi points out, because they knew that ultimately, again, rocks are muktzah, and that the Rabbanim would not go ahead and move the rocks in order to retrieve the aravas. So something amazing happens. Shabbos comes, people show up in the Beis HaMikdash. Who are the first people to show up? The Gemara says the Amei Haaretz. Simple people. But Am Haaretz, of course, also means often a person who is just unknowledgeable about halacha. The Amei Haaretz realized that the aravas had been taken, and they must have surmised that the baitusim took it. And they saw the rocks under which the aravas were hidden. The Shamtum mitachas havonim, the Amei Haaretz, not realizing the halachos of muktzah, moved the rocks, retrieved the aravas, brought the aravas back, ve'vium hakohanim, and ultimately again they brought them back into the Beis HaMikdash. Rashi says over here, Amei Haaretz shelo hayu b'kiyim be'isr tiltul v'heim haysei yadam im aprushim. The Amei Haaretz did not know about muktzah. They're Amar Hatzim. They didn't know. They didn't know about the halachas of muktzah, so they moved the rocks, retrieved the aravas, and what happened? The Gemara goes on. Ve'avim hakohanim v'zakfum b'tzidei hamizbeach. The kohanim brought the aravas and they stood them up by the corner, or by the sides of the mizbeach. Rashi says over here, "Ve'evim hakohanim v'zakfum, aval Yisrael lo haya nichnas bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach." So ultimately, again, remember, only kohanim could come to bring the aravas to the mizbeach, because in the area, as we're going to discuss, between the ulam, between the antechamber and the mizbeach, only kohanim could enter. So the kohanim took the aravas, went ahead and put them by the mizbeach. Now Rashi points out over here, umidiktani chibut arava michlal debiyad not lenoson uminanim umakifan basachan mizbeach ragleim va'achar kach zok v'nosam. Now, what the Gemara is pointing out over here is as follows. The Gemara is saying over here that the lashon over here is I'm sorry, let me finish the story. So the Amei Haaretz retrieve the aravas, give it to the kohanim. The kohanim go ahead and put it by the mizbeach. Now the Gemara said, why did the baitusim do this? Why did the baitusim steal the aravas? Because the baitusim do not agree to the fact that the process of Arava is Docha Shabbos. They don't believe it's Docha Shabbos. Now, what the Gemara picks up on over here is as follows. The way the Gemara phrases the mitzvah of Arava is Chibut Arava. Chibut, Rashi understands, is a synonym to Nanua, to the waving. So you see over here that when referring to the mitzvah of Arava, the lashon of Chibut, of waving, is used, which makes it clear that the mitzvah of Arava is first waving and then standing it up by the Mizbeach. Alma Benetilahi. You see from here that the mitzvah of Arava is that they literally took the Arava in their hands. They didn't just take it and stand it up by the Mizbeach, but rather they actively took the Aravas in their hands and circled the Mizbeach that way. To which the Gemara says to Yufta, indeed this is a refutation to the position that held that the Aravas are only leaned against the Mizbeach, but in fact we see that true practice was they took the Arava, they circled the Mizbeach with the Arava every day once. We're going to discuss on the seventh day they did it 7 times, and after circling the Mizbeach with the Arava, they stood the Arava up against the sides of the Mizbeach. Incredible. I said, the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, then now we see that Arava is a mitzvah and it's ninua, so why don't we go ahead and say that halacha l'maisa, even after the Beis HaMikdash? Rashi says, "Velo litri keven de menetila haba yeshol lasos zecher lemikdash velitri shvi'ish dilei Shabbos." So why don't we go ahead and we say, now that we understand that Arava is taken, it's taken just like Lulav is taken. Why don't we say that just like the first day of Lulav is Docha Shabbos, even outside of the Beis HaMikdash, so too the 7th day of Arava should be Docha, even outside the Beis HaMikdash, what we call Zecher LeMikdash, to which the Gemara says, Velo nitru, kevan da'anon lo dachinon, inhu nami lo dachu. To which the Gemara says something very interesting, that since, the Gemara is now referring to after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, since we, the Jews of Bavel, would not be Docha Shabbos for Arava, even on 7th day, when 7th day falls on Shabbos. Why? Because remember, in Bavel there was the Succah Diyoma, the calendrical doubt that would prevent them from being Docha Shabbos. Since in Bavel they don't do it, so too in Eretz Yisrael we don't do it. Rashi says, Kevan da'anon begola lo dachina mishum delo kimla bekviyad yarcha. Since in Bavel we're not sure about the calendar, therefore we would not be Docha Shabbos, even for the 7th day of Sukkot for the mitzvah of Arava, so too in Eretz Yisrael they don't do it as well. The Gemara said, 1 second. Vaha Yom Tov Harishon L'Didan Lo Dachi, or L'Dido Dachi. But what about the fact that when the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, we established in yesterday's daf that halacha l'maisa, even after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the mitzvah of lulav would be docha the first day, but it's only docha the first day, of course, in Eretz Yisrael, because the calendar is set, but outside of Eretz Yisrael it's not. Top of Memdalid Amri Lididahu Nami Lodachi. So this is actually incredible, to which the Gemara says, I jumped the gun a little bit by doing the Rambam yesterday, but here the Gemara says it explicitly. The Gemara says, no, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we create uniform practice. And just like in Bavel, they would not take lulav on the first day that falls on Shabbos because of calendrical doubt. So too in Eretz Yisrael, even though there is no calendrical ambiguity, we also will not take the lulav on the first day of Sukkot that falls on Shabbos. And again, Rashi says, why? In order to create national uniformity, national cohesion. Achdus, Rashi says, Shalolasos, first Rashi Mem Daled Medalev, Shalolasos Yisrael agudos. Should make Klal Yisrael into groups. Venira kishtei toros tilididan lo dachi lulav Shabbos. That, remember again, you're going to have a situation where the Jews of Eretz Yisrael are taking lulav on the first day that falls on Shabbos. The Jews of Bavel won't be taking lulav on the first day that falls on Shabbos. That's not good. We spoke about this yesterday. This goes to the same idea. The power of the Beis HaMikdash was the koach ha'achid. It was the glue. And so when there's the Beis HaMikdash, we could tolerate differentiated practices. In the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, the only thing that united us was mitzvahs. It was mitzvahs. That was it, was Torah. So therefore, to create essentially 2 different Torahs, the Jews of Galus do this, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael do this, that Chazal did not want. Therefore, it turns out the Gemara says that halacha l'maisa, even lulav, we saw this in the Rambam yesterday. I'll send it out on the WhatsApp. So you can see the Rambam inside, but even lulav, which originally should have been that even in the aftermath of destruction of Beis Hamikdash, we do it on the first day on Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael, but not outside of Eretz Yisrael. That changed as well in order to create uniformity of practice. Ve'alakashya hanitar. So we'll say, so what's coming out so far is as follows: that halacha l'maisa essentially, in the aftermath of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Chazal made a conscious decision to create uniformity of halachic practice. And now we see it in two distinct areas. We see it by lulav, that even though, again, we made the argument in yesterday's Gemara that when the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael, who have no calendrical ambiguity, should take lulav the first day. The Jews of Galus, who have calendrical ambiguity, should not. Uniformity of practice says no one takes lulav on the first day of Yom Tiv, which falls on Shabbos. Now, a second example of that, technically speaking, Arava on the seventh day should be Docha Shabbos for the Jews of Eretz Yisrael who have no calendrical doubt, but not for the Jews of Babel. Kamashmal, uniformity of practice. The mitzvah of Arava was not Docha Shabbos for anyone. I should say it differently. When the seventh day of Sukkot fell out on Shabbos, the mitzvah of Arava was not Docha Shabbos, both in Eretz Yisrael as well as in the Galus, in order to create uniformity of practice, because it was that uniformity of mitzvahs, that uniformity of avodas Hashem, which created this sense of achdus in the absence of the Beis Hamikdash. To which the Gemara says, but here's the problem. We had two different Mishnayos, right? One Mishnah said, so one Mishnah said everybody would bring, right, when first day of Yom Tiv fell out on Shabbos, everybody would bring their lulav to the Beis Hamikdash on Erev Shabbos. The Tanya idach lebeis hakneses. And another Mishnah that says that when the first day of Yom Tov would fall out on Shabbos, everybody would bring their lulav to shul on Erev Shabbos. Umitartzinon, the way we explained why is one talking about the Beis Hamikdash, why is one talking about a shul? Umitartzinon kan bizman shebeis Hamikdash kayim, kan bizman she'ein Beis Hamikdash kayim. And the way we explained it beforehand was to say the Mishnah that refers to the Beis Hamikdash is referring ultimately to the Beis Hamikdash. When the Beis Hamikdash stood, the Mishnah that was referring to bringing your lulav to shul on Erev Shabbos was talking about once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So the Mishnah seems to make it clear that even in the aftermath of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, they still took lulav on the first day, V'haraya. They went ahead and they brought their lulav to shul Erev Shabbos. At least in Eretz Yisrael, sounds like that's what they were doing. To which the Gemara says, no. So the Gemara says, lo, idi bizman shebeis Hamikdash kayim. Both Mishnayos are referring to when the Beis Hamikdash stood. The Gemara says, so what's the reference to the shul? V'lo kashya, kan b'mikdash, kan b'gvulan. This is very interesting. When the Beis Hamikdash stood, everyone took lulav on the first day, when it was on Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Everyone took lulav on the first day of Yom Tov, which fell on Shabbos, both in the Beis Hamikdash as well as in the Gvulin, in the outlying area. So the Mishnah that says everybody would bring their lulav to the Beis Hamikdash, that refers to Jews who are going to the Beis Hamikdash. The one that said to the Beis HaKnesses was referring to the Jews ultimately, again, who were going to shul, who were not going to the Beis Hamikdash. But both are referring to when the temple stood, when the Beis Hamikdash was Kayam. But after the Churban, Chazal created uniformity of practice. No one takes lulav on the first day of Yom Tov, which falls on Shabbos. Amar le Abaye le Rava, ma'ishna lulav davdina le shiva zecher lemikdash, u'ma'ishna arava davdina le shiva zecher lemikdash. So Abaye asks Rava, I don't understand. Why is it that lulav, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was metaki, and he instituted that we take the lulav all 7 days zecher lemikdash? Okay, so we know we do that contemporarily. So why was there a Zecher LeMikdash instituted for 7 days for Lulav, but yet no Zecher LeMikdash instituted for 7 days for Arava? Arava was also taken all 7 days. So why wasn't there a Zecher LeMikdash enactment for Arava? Very interesting. So Rava first responds, well, that's because a person is actually Yotzei, the mitzvah of Arava, with the Arava that's in the Lulav. To which the Gemara Abaye said, really? That's not true. When you pick up your lulav and the aravas are in there, you're not picking up the aravas having in mind that this is the mitzvah of arava. You're picking up the lulav having in mind that this is the mitzvah of daled minim. And arava is one of the parts of the daled minim. To which the Gemara says, The chitema, the kamagbile, bahadar magbile. Maybe you'll say, well, maybe what a person does is you pick up the lulav once, you have in mind l'shem dalin minim. You put it down, you pick it up again, and this time you have in mind that it's l'shem mitzvah sarava. To which the Gemara says, v'hamaisim b'chol yom delo kav dinan hachi. Nobody does that. That's not what's done. That's not what's done. Amar Rabbi Silber Shaindy Rava. I'll tell you why. Lulav da'oraisa avdinan shiva zecher lemikdash. Arava dirabanan lo avdinan le shiva zecher lemikdash. To which Rav Silber responds very interestingly. In the name of Rava, here's the distinction. Lulav is a da'oraisa. Now remember, lulav is only da'oraisa 7 days in the Beis HaMikdash. Outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it's only a da'oraisa on day 1. So the Gemara says lulav, which is a da'oraisa for 7 days in the Beis HaMikdash, we make a zecher lemikdash that you should take it 7 days outside of the Mikdash. The Gemara says arava, the mitzvah to take the arava every day, is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Because there's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, we did not make it into a 7-day zecher lemikdash mitzvah. To which the Gemara says, really, Arava's d'Rabbanan? Leman, who's in accordance with whose opinion is that Arava is only d'Rabbanan? Ilan Alyse Roth Amar Arvei Nachal Ksiv Shtayim Achas LeLulav VaAchas LeMikdash. If you want to say it's Abishol holds that the mitzvah of Arava is the Doraisa. And where does he learn it out from? It says Arvei Nachal, plural, 2 Aravas. One is to teach you the mitzvah of Arava as it applies to the lulav, and one is to teach you the mitzvah of arava as it applies to a separate, distinct mitzvah to take aravas. Either Rabbanon, Hilchos Gemila. So according to Abishol, it's a daraisa. According to the Rabbanon, it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. The Amar Rabbi, the Gemara says, either Rabbanon, Hilchos Gemila. So Rabbi Yochanan B'Shom Menuchonya ish bigas beis charson, Esther Netius, Arava, V'niso chamayim halacha l'Moshe Misinai. But we saw this Gemara not so long ago that Rabbi Yassi named Rabbi Yochanan named Rabbi Nechunya ish bigas beis charson, that the Esther Netios, the halacha is if you have 10 saplings that occupy an area of 2 beis sa'ah, you are permitted to take care of them even in Elul leading up to Shvius, even though normally we go ahead and we stop all agricultural work already in the month of Elul leading up to the year of Shemitah. Those trees will die. Therefore, you are permitted to go ahead and take care of them up until Rosh Hashanah. Arava, which is the mitzvah of circling the mizbeach with the arava. Nisa chamayim is the water libation, which we'll talk about as well. The pouring of the water on the mizbeach for sukkis. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So clearly, the Rabbanon hold that arava is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. So when you say that arava is a d'Rabbanon, whose opinion? The first opinion says arava is learned that from a pasuk. Second opinion says arava is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Both are agreeing that arava is a da'oraisa. So when you say that arava is a d'Rabbanon, who are you quoting? To which the Gemara says, Amrav Zivid Mishmei Dirava, Lulav de Isla Ikra min HaTorah Bigvulin Avdin Ale Shiva, Zecher LeMikdash. Arava de Lesle Ikra min HaTorah Bigvulin Lo Avdinan Shiva, Zecher LeMikdash. To which Rav Zivid says in the name of Rava as follows. Lulav has a clear and definable, or a clear and identifiable biblical source. It's clear. So we know at the end of the day there is a mitzvah of lulav midaraisa. So again, the daraisa was 7 days in the Beis HaMikdash, only 1 day outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So when you have a mitzvah that has a clear biblical root, that's when we'll go ahead and we'll make a zecher lemikdash mitzvah. Take it now 7 days outside of the Beis HaMikdash as well. Good. But however, arava, as much as we'll agree that it's doraisa, maybe it's learned out from the pasuk of Arvei Nachal, the plural mention of Aravos, or maybe it's the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. But the point is, there is no explicit pasuk that talks about it. Because there's no explicit pasuk that talks about it, Chazal did not feel an imperative to institute a 7-day zecher lemikdash practice to commemorate the arava that was done in the Beis HaMikdash. Amar Reish Lakish, Kohanim Ba'alei Mumin nichnasin bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach kedei latzeis ba'arava. So it's actually very interesting. Reish Lakish said that Kohanim who are Ba'alei Mumin, which means blemished Kohanim, are go ahead and enter in between the ulam and the mizbeach in order to fulfill the mitzvah of arava. Now this is very interesting because under normal circumstances, remember, a Kohanim a blemished Kohen is not permitted to do the avodah. not only is he not permitted to do the avodah, but he's also not really permitted to enter in between the mizbeach, the altar. This was the outer altar, the large altar, the copper altar, mizbeach and the choshes, which was used for animal sacrifice, and the ulam, and the antechamber. Remember again, the antechamber was the hallway that led into the kodesh, that led into the Beis Hamikdash structure. So the mizbeach and the choshes, the copper altar for animal sacrifice, was situated pretty much right opposite the entrance of the ulam. So under normal circumstances, Kohanim who are Baalei Mumin would not enter into that area. But interestingly enough, Reish Lakish says that halacha lemaisa, even Kohanim Baalei Mumin used to enter in the area between the Mizbeach and the Ulam to circle the Mizbeach for the mitzvah of Arava. If you take a look at Rashi says Kohanim Baalei Mumin avheim dochkin v'nichnasim lahakif b'ragleihem v'arava bi'adam. They would also push their way in, right, and they would circle the Mizbeach on foot with the Arava in their hand. The efshar lahakif shleikansu ben olam Mizbeach. So remember again, the only way to circle the Mizbeach is to go in the area between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. So the Gemara says, Amar li Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, Mi Amra. Who said this? Who issued this ruling? So there's two interesting things that's happening over here. Number one is you see once again that the mitzvah of Arava is that you took it by hand and you circle the Mizbeach while holding the Arava. That's one. And number two, that even Kohanim who are Baalei Mumin, even blemished Kohanim, who are normally precluded from entering into this area, would in fact go ahead and circle the Mizbeach with the Arava in hand, thereby entering that area. So Rabbi Yochanan said, who said this? Who issued this ruling? So the Gemara says, Mi Amra, ha'iu Amar. Says Rabbi Yochanan, who said it? You said it. You said it, right? You said it. So the Gemara says, Ha'iu Amar, Tom Rabbi Asi Am Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Nechunya Ish Bekas Beis Charson, Esther Netias, Arava, Finisa Chamayim Halacha Moshe Misinai. So Rabbi Yochanan, you're the one who said that Arava is a mitzvah, and it is a Halacha Moshe Misinai. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant was Ella Mi Amra Benetila. Rabbi Yochanan said, who said that the mitzvah of Arava was that you took the Arava in hand? Right? Dilma bizikifa. Maybe the halacha is you take the Arava and you just stand it up against the Mizbeach. So that Rabbi Yochanan was saying, I'm saying, who said explicitly that the mitzvah of Arava is benetila, taking it? Maybe it's just bizikifa. You lean it against the side of the Mizbeach. Furthermore, mi amra b'bali mumin dilma b'tmimim. Who said that Kohanim, blemished Kohanim, were able to do this practice? Maybe it was only unblemished Kohanim. So Rabbi Yochanan wasn't questioning the notion that the mitzvah of Arava is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. He explicitly said that. He was questioning the two other parts of the statement, namely, who says that the Arava is taken benetila, and who says that it was Kohanim who are Baalei Mumin are permitted to take part in this practice as well. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter, but he's still trying to hone in on the nature of the mitzvah of Arava. Se'itmar, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Levi, Chad Amar Arava Yisod Neviim, V'Chad Amar Arava Minag Neviim. One of them said that the Arava is a Yisod Neviim, and one said it is a Minhag Neviim. So Yisod means we'll call it a concept of the Nevi'im versus a minhag is a custom of the Nevi'im. So if you look at Rashi says Yisod Nevi'im Takanos Nevi'im Achronim Chagai Zechariah Malachi Shamim Takani Takanos Yisrael Ba'anshe Knesses HaGedolah. So Yisod essentially means a takana, an enactment, right? The Nevi'im enacted this takana to take the Arava. And Rashi identifies which Nevi'im, Chagai Zechariah Malachi, members of the Anshe Knesses HaGedolah, the men of the Great Assembly. They instituted this practice to take the Arava. The second opinion says minhag nevi'im. It's not a takon, it's not an enactment, it's not a yisod, it's a minhag. Rashi says, Hinhigo asaham v'lo tiknu lahem. It was a practice that they instituted, but it was not a takana. It was not an enactment. Now, what's the nafkamina if something is a yisod, a takana, or an enactment, or a minhag, or a custom? Rashi says, do you say a bracha? If something is a yisod, or a takana, an enactment, then you could say a bracha, asher kidishana b'mitzvah v'tzivanu al mitzvahs arava. Right? You could say that formulation that you have commanded us because it is an enactment of the Nevi'im. If it's just the minhag, then although the practice is important, you would not say a bracha because there is no vitzivano, right? There is no commandment to go ahead and do this. So the Gemara says, this time the Rabbi Yochanan who Amar Yisod Nevi'im, it must be Rabbi Yochanan who said that it was a takana, that it was a Yisod enactment. Amar Rabbi Avraham Rabbi Yochanan, Arava Yisod Nevi'im. Okay, so Rabbi says it's pretty explicit. Rabbi Yochanan said, Arava is an enactment, a takana, a Yisod of the Nevi'im. Really? Rabbi Yochanan said that Arava is an enactment of the Nevi'im. But one second, we just said a second ago, we'll say it again now. Esther Netias, Arava, V'niso Chamayim, Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. We just said before that Rabbi Yochanan holds that Arava is a Halacha L'Moshe Misinai, not a minhag. Not a minhag, right? Or I should say, forget my minhag. Not an enactment, not a takana, not a yisod. It's a biblical obligation. And say halacha l'Moshe misinai. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, ishtomim keshachada. He was silent for a moment. Va'amar, and Rabbi Avo responded and he said, I'll tell you what happened. Va'amar shachachum v'chazru v'yistum. It's true. Originally, Arava was a halacha l'Moshe misinai, but at some point in time, it was forgotten. Now Rashi points out, how was it forgotten? This is incredible. Rashi says, "Shachachum begalus Bavel, shachachu es haTorah b'miktzas v'zu nishkecha legamrei." Apparently, when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed and we were exiled to Bavel, again, we've spoken about this before, the trauma of the destruction, the trauma of the exile was so intense that there were things that were forgotten. And amongst the things that were forgotten, ultimately was the mitzvah of Arava. It was forgotten as well. To which the Gemara says, so what happened? Originally, the mitzvah of Arava was halacha l'Moshe misinai. It was forgotten. So what does Rabbi Yochanan mean when he says that the Chachamim reenacted it? They made it was a Yisod Chachamim or a Yisod Nevi'im. They reinstituted it. They didn't create something new. They reinstituted something that was already on the books, was forgotten, and then they brought it back. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Umiyam Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? Now remember, what this approach presupposes is that as a result of the Churban, as a result of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the trauma of the Churban caused Babylonian Jewry to forget things. So did Rabbi Yochanan really say this? After all, the Gemara says, V'hamar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said as follows, Dilchon Amri, Dilhonhi. This is very interesting. Rabbi Yochanan said to the Jews of Eretz Yisrael, he said, originally, I felt that Torah was yours. Which means that Rabbi Yochanan felt, because you, the Jews of Eretz Yisrael, remained here, you didn't go out to the diaspora, I always felt that the Torah really belonged to you. You really had a clear understanding of Torah. But ultimately, again, I've seen, however, Dilhonhi. The Torah actually belongs to the Jews of Bavel. If you look at Rashi Divrei HaMaschil, V'amar Rabbi Yochanan Dilchon Amri Dilhonhi. If you look in the middle of that Rashi says something amazing. V'ayom Rabbi Yochanan. It's actually like about 10 lines up from the bottom of Rashi. V'ayom Rabbi Yochanan l'mnei Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan said to the Jews of Eretz Yisrael, Savar hayisi sheTorah shalachem shelo gilisa me'artzechem v'lo haya lachem tiruf hadas. I always felt that really Torah belonged to the Jews. The Jews of Eretz Yisrael had a much greater grasp on Torah. Why? Because you were never exiled, and therefore, again, there was never any trauma. And because there was no trauma, you had clarity. However, Aval Ra'isi shehi shel b'nei Bavel sha'afa pi galu amda lahem chachmas ha'cheresh v'amiskah shkol michonyo. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Yochanan said, but I now see that actually the clarity of Torah really resides with the Jews of Bavel. Now it's interesting. Why is it that the clarity of Torah resided with the Jews of Bavel? Because when we underwent exile, even before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, many of the Gedolei Hador were exiled as well. So because the Gedolei Hador, right, this is the story of Mordechai, because the Gedolei Hador were exiled, their Torah, Bavel became a bastion of Torah. And because Bavel became a bastion of Torah, ultimately again, that clarity remain. It's interesting. You see two incredible yisodos over here, right? See, yisod number one is that why we all need a Rebbe, right? We all have to attach ourselves to someone who could provide us with clarity in Torah and provide us with clarity in life. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be a simple Jew, you could be the greatest Talmud Chacham. Everyone needs someone to anchor them in the clarity of Torah. Not just in the clarity of Torah, just how to learn, but in the clarity of Torah because Torah is life. I need someone to anchor me in the clarity of life. And there's another piece, which is trauma doesn't have to ruin us. You see, we all undergo traumatic events in life. But it's interesting that not only do we have the ability, and sometimes we can find it within ourselves, sometimes we need help from other people, to find the tools to cope with trauma, but not only can you find the tools to cope with trauma, sometimes sometimes it's the trauma itself which brings out the excellence. Sometimes it's the traumatic experience in life the traumatic experiences in life that bring out the kochos, the strength that we never thought we would have. Isn't it amazing how Rabbi Yochanan says the Jews of Bavel have greater clarity in Torah than the Jews of Eretz Yisrael? So yes, it's because, of course, their teachers came with them, but it's also because sometimes adversity forces us to dig deep down within ourselves. Adversity forces us to find kochos that we never knew we had. The Jews of Eretz Yisrael did not have that same level of adversity that the Jews of Bavel did. The Jews of Bavel were transplanted onto alien soil. Al naros Bavel, sham bachinu. When we went to Bavel, we cried because we thought it was the end, but it wasn't the end. We realized that our Torah was with us, our Rebbeim were with us, and that if we dig deep within ourselves, we could find incredible kochos. It's an incredible thing because often we assume that when we encounter traumatic events in life, I'm done, I'm sidelined. And it's not true. It's not true. If we dig deep within ourselves, not only can we manage trauma, but we can grow from trauma. We can become even greater as a result of trauma because the trauma forces us again to find those kochos that we would have never looked to find otherwise. This is, of course, the secret of success of Am Yisrael. We are who we are not despite our trauma. We are who we are because of our trauma. When it applies to the cloud, what applies to the collective, applies to the individual as well. So the Gemara says as follows. See, Rabbi Yochanan. So remember, we wanted to say that Rabbi Yochanan, because we have two contradictory sayings of Rabbi Yochanan. We have Rabbi Yochanan saying that Arava is a Yisod Nevi'im. It was instituted. It's enactment of the prophets. Then Rabbi Yochanan is saying that it's Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. So the Gemara wanted to suggest that really it's Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. And then what happens as a result of diaspora, as a result of the destruction of English exile, we forgot about Arava, and the Chachamim reinstituted it. To which the Gemara said, 1 second, Rabbi Yochanan is on record as saying that the Jews of Bavel didn't forget Torah as a result of their trauma, that in fact they became stronger as a result of their trauma. To which the Gemara said, Lokasha, Amud Beis, Kan, Bemda 44b, Kan B'mikdash, Kan B'gvulin. To which the Gemara says, you're right. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan is not contradicting himself, rather he's referring to two different things. The mitzvah of Arava in the Beis HaMikdash is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. The mitzvah of Arava outside of the Beis HaMikdash is Yisod Nevi'im, was a enactment by the prophets. That's how you reconcile it. So there was no forgetting, there was nothing. Rather, again, in the Beis HaMikdash, it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. That's Rabbi Yochanan meant when he says halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And when he said it's a Yisod Nevi'im, an enactment by the prophets, he was talking about outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Am Rabbi Ami, Arava tzricha shir. So we'll say now speaking a little bit about the mitzvah of Arava. So Arava requires a shir. Now again, we've actually spoken about this before, about the size of an Arava, but remember, that was in the context of Arava for Lulav. Remember again, as part of Dalan Minim, now we're really focusing on the mitzvah of Arava by itself. Ve'inu nitelas ela bifnei atzma, and you can only, for the mitzvah of Arava, you have to take Arava by itself. Ve'in adam yotzei dechavasa ba'arava shebelulav, and you cannot fulfill your mitzvah of Arava with the Arava in the Lulav. Kevan da amar mar eina nitelas ela bifnei atzma. Pshita dein adam yotzei ba'arava shebelulav. So the Gemara says, aren't those two last statements redundant? Once you tell me that halacha l'maisa, you can only be yotzei the mitzvah of Arava if you take an Arava by itself, is it not automatically clear then that you can't be yotzei with the Arava that is bound together with the Lulav? To which the Gemara says, what would you have thought? Hani mili hechadala agbe v'hada agbe. Aval agbe v'hada agbe imalo. I might have thought like this. I might have thought, when can't you be yotzei the mitzvah of arava, the arava, and the lulav? That's when you're picking everything up together. But let's say you pick it up, right? Let's say you pick up your lulav the first time, and you pick it up for the sake of dalad minim, to fulfill the mitzvah of lulav, asik, hadas, and arava. So then you put it down, and you pick it up again. But this time when you pick it up again, you have explicit intent. And the reason I'm only picking it up is because to fulfill the mitzvah of arava. You might have thought that would work. Kamash malon, it does not. Kamash malon, that even if you pick up the dalad minim, but this time for the express purpose of only being yotzi the mitzvah of arava, that doesn't work. Arava must be taken on its own. V'Rav Chisda Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Adam yotzei dei chavasa ba'arava shebalulav. This happens to be a point of contention. Rav Chisda saying in Rabbi Yitzchak that halacha l'maaseh you can actually fulfill the mitzvah of arava even with the arava that is part of your dalid minim. Incredible. The kamashira. What's the shear of arava? Right? What kind of arava? What's the shear of arava for the mitzvah of arava? Rav Nachman gimel bade olin lochin. Rav Nachman said 3 moist branches. Okay? So you need 3 moist branches. Rav Shesha Samar afilu ala echad ubad echad. So Rav Shesha says even one branch. Now here's what's interesting. The way this sounds is either even one branch, or bad echad means even one leaf. So the Gemara says, really? The Gemara says, Allah echad ubad echad sakadaitcha. Is that really possible? That you could be able to mitzvah arava with just a stalk, or with just one leaf? Ela ema afilu Allah echad bibad echad. For the mitzvah of arava, you could be yotzi even with an arava that what? Has just one stalk with one leaf. So in other words, so the mitzvah of arava, all I need is one arava, and ultimately, again, even if that arava has only one leaf on it, I could be yotzi the mitzvah of arava. Meaning, again, remember, this is different than the halacha of aravos for lulav. This is talking about, again, the mitzvah of Vidal Minim, I'll say. This is the mitzvah of arava by itself. What the Gemara is positing right now is one branch with even only one leaf is going to be enough to be yotzei the mitzvah. So the Gemara says, Amar Aivu. Aivu says as follows, Hava ka'ina kamei Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok. So Aivu tells an incredible story, which will begin today and in Meretz Hashem continue into tomorrow's daf. And again, we'll talk about the halacha l'maisa with the mitzvah of arava as well. So the Gemara says, Aivu says, I was once standing in front of Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok. Okay? So Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok is good. Va'aisi hahu gavra arava kamei. And there was a man who came before Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok, and he brought with him an arava. Va'aisi hahu gavra arava kamei, shakil chavit below baruch. He took the arava, chavit, meaning he shook it around, and he did not make a bracha. He did not make a bracha on the mitzvah of arava. Kasavar minog neviim. Ultimately, again, he held that ultimately, again, it was a minog neviim. Right? Remember, again, Rashi points out minog neviim. Bigvulin v'lo yisod neviim hilchach inatzricha bracha. This story happened outside of the Beis Hamikdash. And again, it happened in the presence of Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok. Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok didn't say anything. So obviously, again. And what happened? The Gemara, I'm sorry. Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok is one who's taking the arava. A man brought Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok the arava. Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok shook the arava, didn't make a bracha. Clearly indicating to us that what? Rabbi Elazar bar tzadok holds that the mitzvah of arava outside of the Beis Hamikdash is a minhag neviim, as we saw before. Minhag neviim meaning it was a practice of the neviim, not a takana, not a yisod, not a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and therefore no bracha. So the Gemara goes weiter. Aivu v'chizkiya b'nei barsei dirav aisu arava lekame dirav. So what happened? The Gemara says Aivu and Chizkiya, right, the sons of the daughter of Rav, brought an arava to Rav, chavit v'lo baruch. And same idea, Rav went ahead and took the arava, he shook it around, didn't make a bracha, kasavra minag neviimi. Once again, because he clearly held also that arava outside of the Beis Hamikdash ultimately, again, was a minag neviim, and therefore no bracha. Again, we'll say we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this in the halacha l'maisa component of Meretz Hashem in tomorrow's daf. Again, we also do a zecher to the arava. We normally do this on Hoshana Rabbah. We'll discuss. But again, clearly, what you begin to see is it seems to be conventional wisdom says, or the majority opinion says, that the mitzvah of arava in the Beis Hamikdash was a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and the mitzvah of arava outside of the Beis Hamikdash was a minhag neviim. And therefore, again, halacha lemaisa, there was no bracha made on Arav, at least by these individuals. Again, we'll see the halacha lemaisa. Amar Ivo, hava ka'imna kamei Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. So Ivo says, one time I was standing before Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. Asa likamei hahu gavra. So a particular man came before Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok and he had a kasha. Now this is incredible, another Shemitah kasha, which is really beautiful. Amar lei, so this man says to Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, Kiryasa isli, Karma Isli, I own a couple of villages, and in those villages are a couple of vineyards. Now the truth is, we're going to see it's not really vineyards, it's olive groves. Olive groves. So what happens? So the Gemara says, and this man says, Karmaya Isli, Zeisa Isli, and in these krumim, in these groves, I go and I grow olives. Va'asu b'nei Kiryasa, and so there are people who work for me. And now people who work for me, and what happens? The Gemara says, "Umekashkishin bikarmaya va'ochlin bezese." They come, they work the fields, and they take the olives as the wages for their labor. Arich or lo arich? Is this an appropriate practice or not? So, if you look at Rashi says, "Mekashkishin bikarmaya odrin es akramim b'shvius." So the workers come. So this guy comes again. The guy comes before Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, and he says, "Listen, I own villages and I own fields, and I own olive fields, right? And what happens? People from the villages come to work in my fields. Now this was happening on Shemitah. Now we'll discuss how they work in the fields on Shemitah. They come to work in my fields on Shemitah, and I don't pay them wages. Instead, they just go ahead and take the olives as their wages." Is this permitted or not? Look at Rashi one more time. So obviously, if they're taking the olives as their wages, that means the olives are not hefker to the poor as what's supposed to happen on Shemitah. So is this okay or not? Now, if you look at Rashi, arich olo arich, tov la'asos kain olo. Is it okay to do this or not? Or not? So the Gemara says, so olo arich amrle. So Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok responds, lo arich. It's not appropriate. Not appropriate. So the Gemara says, now Rashi says, why is it inappropriate? Amrle lo arich lefi sha'ata poreh pe'ulasa mipero shvius v'atorah amrle achla v'lo l'schora. See, interestingly enough, Rabbi Elazar says it's not appropriate. Why? Because essentially the halacha is that the produce of the Shemitah year cannot be used for commercial purposes. Essentially, you're using the produce to pay the wages of your workers, which is a commercial use of peros shvius, which is going to be aser. So the Gemara says, Amar le lo arich. He says, no, ultimately, again, it's not appropriate. So listen to this. Hava kashavik le va'azil. So the man left, and he came back a little while later. Va'azil Amar, so the Gemara, I'm sorry, we'll see actually. Havakashavik le va'azil, as the man was leaving, we're going to see, he comes back in just a moment. As the man was leaving, right, Amar, Kadu havis dari ba'ara hada mentioning. So Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok says, I've been living in this place for 40 years. I've been living in this particular town for 40 years. V'lo chamisi bar inish mahalich ba'archon ditakin kiden. And I've never seen a man who walked in such a proper path like this individual. Look at Rashi for just a moment. V'lo chamisi, Amar Elazar Atzadok kado hayisi dar, kvar avru memshona shani dar be'eretz hazos. 40 years I lived in this place, Elazar Atzadok says, reading Rashi, right across in Rashi. V'lo chamisi bar inish, lo re'isi ben adam, I've never seen a person who is so yashar. I've never seen a person who has walked in such a yashar way. So the story is not finished. The Gemara says, Hadar va'asi va'amrli ma'ime avid. Interestingly enough, the farmer originally came to Rabbi Tzadok and asked him a specific shayla. Can I go? Is this practice okay? That the farmers are coming, they're working the olive field, they're taking the olives as their wage. Rabbi Elazar Tzadok says, no, it's not okay. The guy leaves. He then, right, Rabbi Elazar Tzadok praises him. The guy then comes back. So what should I do? It's interesting that he asked the shayla, he got the answer, he left, and then after he left, he realized, okay, so I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So he came back and he asked Rabbi Elazar Tzadok again, what should I do? Afkar zeise lichashuchya. Go ahead and make the olives hefker for the poor. v'tein pritiya l'kashkushe kramim, and pay a wage to the people who are to the people who work in the fields. In other words, pay your workers. You have to pay your workers, but the olives themselves ultimately again should become hefker. I will say, it's interesting to note that Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok praised this individual. Right? It's such a dramatic place. For 40 years I've lived in this place, and I've never seen a man, the mahalich ba'archa de tikun kadein. I never saw a man, now even the Lashon is interesting, the mahalich ba'archa de tiknon, who walks an organized or a set or an established path. Rashi says over here, shemahalich b'derech yasher, walks on a straight path like this man. It's interesting because what's so great about this farmer? In other words, it's great. He asked the Shaila, fantastic. What is it that Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok understood that was so great about this man? And perhaps what's happening over here is something so simple yet profound, which is, what did this simple farmer want to know? Mutar aser. Can I do this or can't I do this? Is this the Ratzon Hashem? Is it not the Ratzon Hashem? Is it the will of God? Is it not the will of God? Is it appropriate or inappropriate? Sometimes in life, we make things so complicated, and we make so many different cheshbonos, because Rav Shamshon Hirsch says, why did the Jews build the golden calf? Because it makes no sense. The whole episode makes no sense. After everything they saw, they built the golden calf. Rav Shamshon Hirsch says, because they wanted immorality. That's really what they wanted. They wanted to be able to engage in immoral practices, but they didn't want to be on the wrong side of the law. So what did they do? They created a new system which would justify their behaviors. Rav Hirsch says, herein lies the difference between avodah zarah and belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my job is to make myself in God's image. Avodah zarah is I make God in my image. I decide what I want. Here's what I want to do. And I create a system, and I create a deity, and I create a theology around what I want to do. Avodas Hashem means I mold myself into the Ribono Shel Olam's image. Avodah Zarah is I mold theology into my image. And whether we realize it or not, we do this so many times in life, right? There's something I want to do. I do this something I want to do, right? And so I know that there's a part of me that knows, probably not the right thing to do. I don't mean even something, God forbid, illicit or terrible or immoral or unethical, but something that's just not really all that good. And we do something amazing, which is we create cheshbonis. But there's this, and there's that, and there's this circumstance, and that circumstance, and I once heard this, or I once heard that opinion, or I once heard this, and I construct an entire theology in order to go ahead and justify what it is that I want to do, even though I know deep down it's not the right thing. And we know that's not the right way to live. The right way to live is that when faced with a decision, is it mutter or is it aser? Is it mutter or is it aser? And sometimes you'll say, not everything falls into mutter aser. Is it the Ratzon Hashem? Is it not the Ratzon Hashem? Is this something that the Ribono Shel Olam would want me to do? Or is it something that perhaps Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want me to do? That's the fundamental shaila. So this man comes before Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, and he says, Rebbe, can I do this or can't I do this? That's it. Now understand, this is a business question, right? This is going to be money out of his pocket, because now they're taking their wages from the olives. Now he knows if it's not allowed, he's going to have to pay them additional wages. Plus he's going to lose the olives because the olives become hefker to the poor. And yet, what did this man do? Rebbe, just tell me. Is it mutter or is it aser? Should I do it or shouldn't I do it? And Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok was amazed by the simplicity of just this regular, ordinary Jew. And that's what Rabbi Elazar says, I've been living here for 40 years and I haven't seen a person, the mahalich ba'archan de tiknun. See, Rashi understands the mahalich ba'archan tiknun means who walks in a yashar, on a straight path. But the tiknun means organized. Right? It means masudar. There's an organization. There is a process. That here's a guy who just wants to know, is this the Ratzon HaBorei or not? Is this the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu or isn't it? If it's the will of Hashem, I'm going to do it. And if it's not the will of Hashem, I'm not going to do it. There's no cheshbonos, right? There's no calculations. There's no this. If it's not the Ratzon Hashem, if it's not the will of the Ribono Shel Olam, I don't want to do it. I'm just not going to do it. And Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, because I guess Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok probably, most of the shilas that he got usually began with a shaila and then began with a lot of back and forth conversation. And here was a guy who was just telling him, Rebbe, just tell me, mutter or aser. If it's mutter, fantastic. And if it's aser, fantastic, I'm just going to stop. And Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzaddik is so amazed by the simplistic theology of this Jew, by the simplistic avodas Hashem. I just want to know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to do. And if he wants me to do it, I'm going to continue on it. And if he doesn't want me to do it, I'm going to stop. Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzaddik blown away by the simplicity of this Jew. But of course, it's this simplicity which we should all be zocheh to emulate. So we'll stop over here for today. I know I'm ending mid-story, but Emeretz Hashem will pick up with the rest of the story, including how are they even working the field to begin with on Shemitah. Emeretz Hashem tomorrow. Wishing everyone a wonderful day. Shkoyach.